Hey there, this week I built Trevor's trailer from Grand Theft Auto. This is part one of a two-part series. This is just the basic body. It's really easy. I know I say that with a lot of things too, but this is a really super easy build and it looks really good and I really liked it. The next video is going to be just huge amounts of detailing, but this, if you want to build it, this is your basic simple guide, and I hope you get something from this one, and I hope you enjoy the video.
I made a paper template for this because it was just easier to draw it up on paper, and I cut out the doors and windows where I needed to, and I used it to cut out 2 sheets of cardboard for the front and the back. Make sure your corrugations are running along the length of the trailer, very important, and then just draw them in and you can cut them out as well. I did this very roughly, but once again it's on camera. If my hands didn't get in the way, I would have used a ruler to do this a little bit neater than how I'm doing it. Once you've cut these little pieces out, make sure you hang on to them because you can use them as templates to do the window and door frames. It'll save you measuring. So I've got the bottom and the top as well, and also front and back panels. This sort of thing, it's pretty easy to work out on your own. You just look at an image of the actual trailer, it would help as well. There's a couple of pieces that'll need putting across the front of this. Just some little strips that'll be easy to glue in just on the front there and on the top there. It made it less complicated to do it that way. And I just hot glued it all together. And I also altered the base. I realised I needed a piece of cardboard that will allow for the porch that's going to be at the front. Just make it one piece so it's a little easier. And give it all a nice good spray of some black paint. These are the pieces that are just panels for the garage off the side. Give it a slight curve so the roof will sort of look like it's dipping a little bit. I'll cut that out later and put the door in. I just like this little piece as a panel for a bent looking garage door. And then just glue them together as well. And I made like an assortment pack of my own sort of corrugated pieces of cardboard and sort of smoother ones, and these are all different types of cardboard, and because of the different types of materials it'll look like they'll be sort of clinging to the garage. I really sort of mixed it all up. Some I peeled, some I didn't. You want different textured looking pieces of material for this one. You just put them all together really basically, as you can see there. Pop the roof on. You don't have to worry too much about that if you're going to do some things that are more detailed in the second video, because it will be covered with tarp and things like that later. All the corrugated pieces on the sides of the garage, I just sort of overlapped them. I didn't do them neatly because it really looks dilapidated and just bits of trash everywhere, so you can be rough as you like with this. It's a good thing. On the back I used the really good corrugated pieces, some of the flatter ones and some not at all, because it looked like there's pieces of plywood, and I just drew them in with a pencil to give sort of an impression, and the paint will do the rest. The side, I made this up because I couldn't get a look at this side, but I use this lid because there's no drag. Just use whatever you can to make the corrugated impressions better. And give that a spray as well when you're done. And that's basically the whole body put together. It's pretty quick and easy to do, really. The paint on, you can really see those corrugations running, looking like the material of a trailer. I put it up on some legs because it's off the ground with lattice under it, but I accidentally glued the garage on. So I had to pull it off and then realise, because it was ground level and not up flush with the actual trailer, So don't do what I did. Keep them separate until you're completely done and then glue it down. And that's it, ready to start playing with and seeing how it looks. I used the lattice to sort of gauge the height. I'll show you how to do the lattice in a little bit, but I keep playing with things so I know that everything's in line and not sort of out of whack. A bit like a puzzle that you keep putting back together as you work with it. I made a grey with some yellow ochre, blue, brown, black and white. Don't ever just use black and white because it's just really wrong. It looks strange. Give it a very rough, sort of not really a dry brush, but it's pretty rough. There's not much on here. If you're not used to using cardboard, it can buckle and warp, and if you put too much paint on or the paint is too wet, you'll find that you will have problems with it. So just sort of do a really heavy dry brush and then apply it in layers like that, and you'll find you won't have problems, and it will strengthen on its own as it dries. Super rough, so I don't lose all that nice black paint that I put down. It'll keep all the detail there for me. You can really see all the different materials sort of coming out from that. It looks good now. All the bits of trim of anything, I just dip it into the, it's a black and brown wash. It's all watered down, just acrylic paint. And then give it a bit of a soak depending on how dark you want it. I used it for virtually everything. The stairs, I just used some XPS foam. I just cut my first step and then I just put it on the foam and then cut the second and then just build it up. I don't know how else to do this, so it worked, oddly enough. It's a bit messy, but this is another messy, inaccurate job which suits me very well. Oops. I've got all these little pieces ready to go. I just sort of need to keep placing them and making sure everything fits and is in the right place and is the right size. I got all the lattice done. I didn't know what to use, and I ended up finding a piece of fly screen on the ground in the shed and realised the pattern was exactly what I needed and the size was close enough. So I just cut it at the right angle and used coffee stirrers and cut some down the centre so they would be half the width, and then just made the pieces that I needed at the right height for the base of the trailer. Gave them a white spray of paint, and then I dirtied them up a bit, but they will be made dirtier in the next video because this is very, very rough at the moment. I really like how these came out. They're just, I don't know, super detailed. It's so small. It's really nice. And that's it, really starting to take shape now. To give it the colour it needed, I just made up sort of a creamy colour. You could probably use a paint straight out of a tube, some sort of cream. It doesn't have to be very specific. It's going to be so dirty later you wouldn't even notice anyway. And I gave it a very rough coat. Actually, I think I gave it 2 coats. I don't know. But I gave it enough so it would take on the colour I wanted. I didn't do down to the bottom because it's going to have a bit of a grey sort of a trim running around the bottom. All those little corrugations I will neaten later. You could put some putty in there or something, fill it with paint, or leave it if you like it. Back to the grey I made earlier, and I put some with the cream. So when I do that big piece of trim across the bottom, it's still cohesive with the colour that's already on there, or they might be too much of a contrast and too stark against it. I don't want it to stand out too much. Just be slightly different. Do it all the way around, and that's the initial paint. I'm going to dirty everything up with the brown and black sludgy wash as usual. Just small amounts, I don't want to go too crazy. Keep some fresh water at hand to keep your brush, it's not to keep it clean, but you can clean your brush really quickly and use it like an eraser. So if you feel like you've put too much on, just wash it really quickly and then just wipe the paint away. It'll stop you feeling like you're making big mistakes, and you can continue working quickly, because this kind of work you do have to do really fast because it dries almost on contact as you're doing it. That's the thing about foam and cardboard, it's so absorbent, everything soaks straight up, and you have to use very small amounts so it doesn't buckle the cardboard. Make it dirty everywhere, that there would be build up around windows, doors, all around the bottom, under the little eave at the top, just anywhere it would naturally form. All over this garage. You just go ham on it. Don't worry about it being too much, because it will dissipate as it dries. Just go absolutely nuts with it, and you'll find it works out a lot better than being careful, because you're trying to replicate something that occurred naturally. So be really rash with it and be brave and just paint like mad, and you'll find it turns out really, really good. This is so thick and compared to the ink that I used to use, but it works. It's got a bit of a sheen on it. That's the only thing that I find is not as good as the ink. The ink had no shine whatsoever. It was just like putting down water that was stained. It was beautiful, but this still works. It's still good. That'll dry nicely. I sort of put a bit on the roof, but you don't need to if you're going to put tarp on it like I will be in the next video. Put a little bit of that brown sludgy watered down paint in all your colours as well, so everything once again cohesively blends back into the entire project, so you haven't got stark colours standing out. This is very sort of thinned down so you can see through it. I had to make this a little bit brown again after I'd done that, because this stayed quite sort of a stark green, and green can be a very troublesome colour to use if it doesn't look natural, and this is an unnatural green. Don't worry if you make things too bright, just make them dirty again. Doing a very messy sort of base rust colour. It'll be just the dark brown that's sort of sitting there beneath that red rust. And it is very, very messy. I ended up doing this rust a little bit heavy, so I ended up getting a cream pencil and kind of lifting it back up and muting the redness and bringing it back out because it was just too heavy. But you know, you might like it quite rusty like this. You can see there it's really, really heavy. So if you make a mistake like I did, don't worry, you can just lift it back up with a lighter colour. Everything works itself out, sort of work in reverse. I made some trim. I printed out a piece of paper that was some ugly wallpaper pattern, but I just needed a strip of brown and orange together. I cut out the piece that I wanted, and then I just went all the way around it and put in its decal stripe. The base, the foam, I put some black watered down acrylic on it, and I put the same stuff on the stairs just so it would soak in a little bit. And because my stairs were too high, because my measuring is dreadful, I just made recesses to the correct depth so the stairs would be nice and even as they went up onto the doors and the porch. The doors I made from XPS foam because I wanted to make impressions in them, and they're quick and easy to make like this, so I went with that. I used pencils after I gave them a quick paint, and I also pressed down into it with a coffee stirrer just to make the impression of what would look like, you know, a window in the door. I used these coloured pencils to make a crisscrossing pattern to make it look like a tartan curtain, and then a bit of plastic on the door for the piece of glass. That's a nice quick little way of making a door with glass and curtain. These little window frames I made from coffee stirrers, and then I just gave them a stain in that black and brown wash and used a silver pen on these, so silver paint would be just fine. And do it roughly, keep it nice and rough looking. And around the edge of the window I used a silver pen. Because of my dreadful measuring skills, I knew it would sort of fit in seamlessly, so I work my way around problems because I struggle to solve them with my measuring, but it worked. I'll show you next time also how to do the curtains. I don't know what happened to the footage. It's gone, never to be seen again. I'll add that and the door frames, and there's the terrain and an absolute huge amount of detailing to do. But until then, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I do hope to see you next time.